Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. Of your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon. Folks, we're going to have a great conversation. First and foremost, the January 6th committee has officially issued a subpoena to former President Donald Trump. They're asking from him a number of things as they're looking to bring him to the stand to feel some level of accountability of what happened on that fateful day. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also, how confident are you that your vote will be counted in November's election? Now, there is a new poll coming out from the Griot that says that nearly 85% of Black people are confident that the vote will be, their votes will be counted. But does that include you? We'll have that conversation and a whole lot more. Also, later on in the next hour, we'll be checking in with author and former paramedic Mr. Kevin Hazards, who's going to talk about his new book, American Sirens, the story of the first Black paramedics and how they had to suffer so much discrimination just to save lives. We'll have that and a whole lot more, so stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Happy Friday, folks. Man, oh man, it took us about 5 or 6 days to get here. But happy Friday. Hopefully you have been having a great weekend. Hopefully today's show will help you to have a phenomenal end of the week. We got a lot to talk about today. And I wanted to start off the conversation discussing the latest news coming out of Washington, D.C. about the January 6th committee officially issuing a subpoena to former President Donald Trump for his involvement in the January 6th storming of the Capitol. Take a look at this, folks. They are calling for accountability. Yes, demanding he testify. Now, remember, I had a conversation just not too long ago saying that the president had said initially that he would testify, but he would want to testify live on camera. And some of you are part of my online culture crew. Y'all were like, I'm here for it. I got my popcorn ready. That may not happen. It may not happen. And according to the report and according to the nature of this subpoena, the president has to fulfill a number of obligations before we even get to that point where some people are already forecasting that this may not be the high political theater that many people expect, but more like a legal battle that we may not see actually play out until later on. But take a look at this, folks. This is what came out of the AP story. The 9-member panel issued a letter to President Trump's lawyers demanding his testimony under oath by November 14th and outlining a request for a series of corresponding documents, including personal communications between the former president and members of Congress, as well as extremist groups. Now, according to the chairman, Benny Thompson, he, and along with Vice Chair Liz Cheney, they both wrote, "We recognize that a subpoena to a former president is a significant and historic action. We do not take this action lightly." Now, it is unclear if President Trump and his legal team will respond to the subpoena. He could comply or negotiate with the committee, announce he will defy the subpoena, or ignore it altogether. He could also go to court and try to stop it. So the president seems to have a number of options, which might not be a win for him. Now, also tied with this, we know that as the January 6th committee has been issuing subpoenas for a lot of the president's associates, we know today it was also announced that one of the close strategists and allies and former strategists and close friends of the president, Steve Bannon, he was sentenced to 4 months in prison because he decided not to adhere to the subpoena that was issued by the January 6th committee. So he's going to be doing 4 months. However, he's not going to jail just yet. He's going to be out until they determine. I think they're calling for to see if they can appeal this case until all of the details have been determined. But we will see how that play out. But if former President Donald Trump decides not to go, there might be some pros and cons in all of these options. So I wanted to have this conversation. Certainly join us in the discussion. My online culture crew, y'all know how we do. Hit me up on the YouTube and on our Facebook streaming, as we're streaming live right now. And also check us out on blackstarnetwork.com, of course. And let's have a conversation about, what do you think the president will do? And do you think it's going to be in his best interest not to get involved in this? Share your thoughts on this. And let me bring in Culture Crew member Bakari Jones, who is an advocate and an activist, a strategist, and just a sister that's been involved in the struggle for years here in the city of Baltimore and across the country. Bakari, good to have you back on. How are you today? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, man. Glad to be back, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another week.
Absolutely. All right, Bakari, I had to bring you in on this one.
Yeah.
So what do you make of this latest situation with January 6th committee and Trump with this subpoena? You think he's going to comply?
It's a roll of the dice, Farajii. It's a roll of the dice. I do. I believe that he's going to comply. Whatever path he takes, I see Trump leveraging as much of his social political capital as possible to make this as large of a media spectacle as he possibly can. I think those are all opportunities that he will have to engage with his base again. So to me, yes, I think if Farajii, I can't say I don't know, but my thought is that whichever path is going to create the biggest audience, I think that's the path we'll take forward. Right. So on one hand,
that's a good metric.
I feel like, when you mentioned, will cameras be in the courtroom? That to me, it's a tremendous opportunity for him from a media standpoint. So I think whichever path is going to create the largest audience is the path that he will likely take moving forward.
So here's the interesting thing about that, Bakari, because initially, like I say, it was reported that he wanted to do like a live testimony. Mm-hmm. He wanted to do, he probably wanted like a prime time special type situation going, right? His people around him, his lawyers, advisors, no, don't do it. They're like, that's not the move, right? And one of it's like that was a further glimpse into his thinking. Like he's thinking, how can I get my name out there? How can we do this in the biggest, boldest way that we possibly can? How can we make this a circus, right? How can we make this a thing?
Yeah.
But not thinking about, bro, you still under oath.
Right.
Like anything that you say, not only will be heard by the committee, now it will be fully heard by the American people. Mm-hmm. So, and if you decide to do this, it's going to be major blowback to everything.
Absolutely.
And I'm saying that this is for them to say, this is going to be a blowback for everything that you wanted to do. It's like antithetical. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I think I'm going to go back to what my original analysis of and Bakari, you can tell me I'm wrong. I think he's like Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. I think he wants to tell his side of the story. Mm-hmm. I really do. I really think this guy is like, no, they're not telling it right. Like I want to tell my side. Mm-hmm. I can let me spin it the way I want to spin it. I think he really wants to be in front of them. I think he wants to face Liz Cheney. I think he wants to, thumb his nose at the committee. I think he wants to do it.
I do too. I agree. More and more of a spectacle, right? It just becomes more and more of a spectacle. I can understand also, and I'm glad I won't say glad is relative, but it makes good sense that his legal team is saying, no, Mr. Trump, that's not actually the path that we think you should take forward, right? But maybe his ego will win out, and maybe it will be in favor of this country,
We know that Steve Bannon got 4 months because he decided not to do it. But here's the thing. He decided not to comply to this subpoena, but he actually still wants to give his say to the committee. He wants to do it in like a very like closed door type of situation.
He doesn't have the same right, but he doesn't have that same level of pomp and circumstance, in related to his personality, I think, as former President Trump does. So to me, that makes sense that they would both, that they would take such diverging approaches. To me, that makes, I think that makes a lot of sense given, how both of them have moved.
Right. Absolutely. Let's go to our online culture crew, hear what they got to say. Folks are checking in. Jawan, thank you so much for kicking us off this afternoon, sis. You said we already know Trump will fight it, but if he doesn't comply, prepare a cell for him next to his buddy Bannon. Laughing emojis. I'm telling you, Trump wants to go down. If he goes down, he wants to go down in like fiery flame,
like blaze,
like
imaginary blaze of glory.
You know what I'm saying? But I think a part of this too speaks to the reason he wants to do it so bold and all of those things. I think he truly believes that he's not going to be held liable for what happened on January 6th. Everything has bounced off of him, right? Like other people have intercepted the hits for this guy throughout this whole process, right? Whether he was during his presidency or now after his presidency, he hasn't really he hasn't taken the brunt of the hits of things that have come up. Even with this lawsuit filed by the state of New York, he created a second Trump organization, right? Like he's not a guy that's going to be like, oh, okay, they got me down in the dumps. He doesn't think that he can get caught. He really doesn't think he can get caught. He doesn't think he'll be held liable. He don't even see himself as being responsible. His mindset, and I'm telling y'all, folks, I mean, y'all correct me if I'm wrong. His mindset is completely Bakari like.
These photos, I'm sorry. The line of photos.
I mean, that's the face.
I know. Right. But I agree, he doesn't.
Like,
and
he
why
doesn't think he's going to get caught.
Why would he? Right? So, I agree with you, brother. That one.
Me get caught? Nah, never. I don't get caught.
And again, it's like this. Again, his opportunity to speak to his base in to actually grandstand, like I think he wants the opportunity to do so.
I think he does too. But then the other thing is, which is interesting, has been this whole classified document situation, and it was just revealed today also, and we'll certainly. At some other point, probably sometime next week, we'll see how this thing go. But it was revealed and reported that now he had submitted some documents, but the documents that he kept were to Iran's missile programs, some documents relating to China, very like highly, highly sensitive. He kept these things for himself. So it's like, again, any other president, any other person would be like, you would be under like great scrutiny, espionage, treason. I mean, these aren't like completely, random terms that you throw around. And he is still talking about, he's still deciding which Republicans should run. He still has a great influence in the party. He's still contemplating, even though he hasn't officially announced, still contemplating running for presidency of the United States again. I mean, I'm at this point, Bakari, with this guy that I'm not even trying to figure out what is going to be the hammer, like which part, what thing is going to serve as the hammer to take him down.
You believe there's one?
There's always one. You know what I mean? Like there's always one. But sometimes the biggest ones, the most blatant ones, aren't the ones. It just be like the small things. Like he got a woman in court right now that's claiming that he raped her. That could be the one. I don't know.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We know the history of Al Capone. He shot up, killed people. He did all this stuff. It was tax evasion. Like,
Finally took him out. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Don't know. I don't know. I'm asking let's ask the culture crew. Like, do y'all think this is the one? Like, I have no idea. Let me go to some of these responses already. Jawan, thank you so much. You said that Ming Lee, Natasha Sturge, you said this man should be in jail. This makes no sense. Makes no sense. No sense.
Throw it away.
And Biden, and the thing is, Bakari, I think Biden has to, I'm going to keep driving this home. Biden has to like really deal with this. Because every time Trump gets into trouble, Trump is able to spin the conversation, spin the story, make it work for him. Whereas you know what I'm saying? Like when they went to his property to retrieve the documents, he went on this whole thing. They're after me. He raised money from that. You know, during the whole January 6th hearings, look at him. They're after me. He raised money from that. It's like Biden got to figure out a way to deal with this because he still has this influence that's just crazy. Damon, my guy, you said, I agree. Number 45 wants the biggest stage to make a show out of it. Yeah, he does. But the crazy part is, okay, once he gets on there, on the testimony, he probably going to start talking about evoking the Fifth Amendment. I plead the Fifth. I don't want to say. The last time they did a deposition of the former president, he said he invoked the Fifth Amendment, like they said, 200 times, I think, some crazy amount of times that he kept saying.
It's going to be like the equivalent of a telethon, I think, if he ends up, you know, if it ends up being streamed, I think it will be like a telethon for him to just raise money, you know, which is exactly like it's terrifying, really, when you think about it. That being an opportunity that he could be given that large of a platform. But if he has it, I think he would take it. You know, I'm curious about if there's any pushback. I know from his legal team, obviously, because they understand that it would, you know, work to their detriment from a legal standpoint. But I wonder also if there's any pushback from the Democrats in terms of him having, or excuse me, I'm saying the Democrats, a prosecution for him to be able to prevent that from happening, because it's an opportunity to mobilize, you know, a really terrifying group of people in this country.
Absolutely. Shalinda, you checked in and say they should give it to him. He won't be able to shut up. I mean, he probably won't. I know he wouldn't. He wouldn't shut up. But I don't think his advisors, his people around him, want to. I know that. They do not want him. They do not want to bring him on a national stage in front of an investigation of this magnitude and have him tell his side of the story. They would not. I mean, that's a disaster.
Yeah.
The way he moves, the way he speaks, the way stuff comes out of his mouth, that would be a disaster.
Yeah, he would likely perjure himself, right? I mean, I'm sure that's the legal team's fear, but he's just going to end up perjuring himself. So,
absolutely. He either is going to perjure himself, and I mean, everything is going to be on record. But the worst is if he decided to do it in the big crazy fashion that he wants to do it. I mean, they certainly want to wait till after the elections, right? Because that would only make sense. So you don't completely just wreck the GOP's efforts to try to regain Congress. But if they do it after the election, it may help. But like I said, in this report, he has to turn in some documents by November the 4th, right? And if there's another deadline in here, and I want to make sure I want to bring that up. By November 14th, something else has to be done. So there's still some steps that has to take place first before even that big decision is even made. And it's going to be super, super interesting. Mike V, you checked in, my guy. You said, look, it's free publicity. He spends nothing and gains everything in the end, proving his moniker of Teflon Don. Yeah, absolutely. Sophia, you said I need someone with the what she said with the ... I curse your ass out, Don energy. Drinks committee. Then I'll be more interested. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. You know what? I'm learning something. Bakari. That even when somebody that you know is guilty, and everybody knows he's responsible. I mean, like, you don't.
Right.
We know that what he said instigated, created the energy, and got the crowd riled up for them to do what they were going to do. Now, did they plan it from the beginning? I think that's one of the big questions. Like, was it a situation where they came to Trump and then Trump was like, we're going to walk and I'm going to walk with you. And then it was like a reaction to, oh, okay, we're going to take this move. Or was it like, hey, man, be January 6th. We're going to have this rally. And the rally was really a front to the storming of the Capitol. I think that's where the investigation is really looking at, like, what was done beforehand and what was done like right there on the spot. So I think to that point, that's something that we need to, we have to keep in mind. Sophia, you said he's the epitome of whiteness by its definition. Yeah, white privilege, whiteness, however you want to break it down. Yeah, he's taking full advantage of all of that. Conscious thought. Donald Trump is a dynamic dunderhead. Why does this? Conscious thought, you be dropping jewels, but why does that sound like a fourth grade?
Right. Dunderhead. Wow.
Wow. Conscious thought, you also said Donald Trump's ego is so hyper-inflated that he continues to believe that everything he says and does is perfect, except Eric. Nice. He does. That's called narcissism. That's what that's called, sir. That's called narcissism. All right, so I think, should we do it online? Should we do a bet? No, I'm not going to bet because I don't bet. But all right. So what's your take, Bakari? He's going to do it. He's going to leave it up to his legal teams. He's going to comply to the November 4th deadline to submit. What do you think he's going to do next?
I think if I had to guess, if I were a gambler, right? If I were a gambler, I think I will put my coins on him essentially forcing his legal team to talk him out of it. I think if the legal team is not able to talk him out of it, I think he will likely go forward and attempt to publicize this this testimony.
So you think he's going to really push for a public testimony?
I do.
Okay.
That's
okay.
I think if it's not, I think it will be because his legal team, and probably those around him have convinced him. I know it looks this way, but like I think I think he's at the point now where he's bet on himself enough, from an egomaniac kind of, mindset. It just seems like he's bet on himself enough to not back down. Right. I mean, he's been egregious and he has been, unfortunately, a bit unstoppable. So I don't see him backing down at this point.
All right, so I'm gonna say, all right, I like you. You say he's going to go public. I think he's going to go private. Okay. I think he's going to still testify. I think he will testify, but I think he's going to do a private testimony. I think he's going to have to do like a deposition.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying. I think it will be, for me, if I was, say, the head of ABC, NBC, or some of these big networks, would it be worth it to Fox may carry it.
Right.
Fox may carry it.
It's pay-per-view. At that point, I mean, come on. I'm just saying. Ratings through the roof.
I don't think I think all of that pomp and circumstance stuff, I think it's going to go out the window. I think he's going to say something. I think he's going to speak, but I think he's going to have his lawyers, and I think it's going to be behind closed doors. I think it's going to be behind closed doors. Now, it will be interesting to see how the January 6th committee responds to that. So that's the other thing, right? And like I said, folks, we're going to certainly keep our eyes open, but he has not been good on keeping up with deadlines for, I don't know why they set a deadline for November 4th for him to turn over some documents. The man hasn't turned over documents from the time he was president. So what's been 2 years?
Yeah.
We'll see if he complies to that. That will be interesting in and of itself. All right, folks. If you checked it out, we got a poll up right now on our YouTube as we're streaming live on YouTube. We're asking a question: will Trump testify before the January 6th committee? We got votes coming in. Hey, Keenan, let's keep that poll up for a little bit longer. I don't want to. It will be interesting. I know folks are just checking in. So if you haven't had a chance to vote in the poll, we just asking. You think he's going to testify? Yes or no? Give us your thoughts, and then at the end of the next segment, we will certainly tell you the results. All right, folks, look, speaking of politics, we got to take a quick pause, but when we come forward, speaking of politics, are you confident that your vote will be counted in this year's November primary? I'm asking the question because now that we know that Republicans are screaming about election integrity or the lack thereof, many Black folks still hold on to the faith and hope that democracy is going to work in this year's election. I'm going to share with you what the Griot said in their latest poll, and I want to get your take on that. So stay with us. That discussion is up next here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shootings.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is RolandSMartin.com.
Welcome to Atlanta, one of the most expensive housing markets in America. But rather than help out, Brian Kemp cashed in. He made hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate. His net worth skyrocketed. And while Atlantans struggled to stay in their homes, Kemp gave $10,000 tax handouts to the richest Georgians and a nearly $700 million no-bid contract to his campaign donor, Brian Kickback Kemp, making Georgia work for him, not you.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. All right, as we talk about what's happening with former President Donald Trump, now let's talk about what may be happening with us. Now, as we know, we are just a couple of weeks away, just a little bit more than 2 weeks, a little bit less than 3 weeks away from the November 8th midterm election, an election that many people are calling absolutely consequential and pivotal in shifting the direction of America at this point. And given the fact that there has been a lot of conversation around the issue of election integrity, voter suppression, and more tactics and strategies that both state and local lawmakers and voting officials are taking, people are wondering if votes will be counted, especially those on the GOP side of things. But on the Democrat side, or rather, I'm not going to assume that every Black person is a Democrat, but for Black folks, this still, regardless of all of this talk, there still seems to be high hopes that every vote will be counted. And this is based on a new GRIO KFF survey that speaks about this issue. Take a look. As Republicans still scream fraud in 2020, Black voters surveyed by the GRIO KFF survey still believes their votes count. Now, I want to get your take on this, folks, because I'm wondering to myself, do you feel your vote will count in this year's midterm election? Do you feel like that this is going to happen, even though we know about voter suppression, even though we know that some election officials are not going to be the most welcoming to some of our people, even though there is talk that we might see even more dangerous, enforcement by everyone from law officials to even some places are talking about hiring private security firms to serve as voting police. All of these things, do you feel like your vote will be counted? This is the big question. And I want you to share your thoughts as we will get to your ideas and your take on this. And I want to bring it back in Bakari Jones, our culture crew member for the day, to share with us her view of this. Bakari, how confident are you that your vote will be counted in this November's election?
I feel relatively confident. I did a little bit of reading about actual rates of voter fraud, and the incidences from the pieces that I've read speak to it being a lot less common than is typically publicized.
Yeah.
So, I think in terms of like our actual votes, it's like that's one thing. The confidence that I have in those that are then elected, maybe not as confident as my actual vote counting.
Okay.
And I, just to be honest, it's so many different layers, right? We're talking about whether or not our actual votes will count. And one of the things that I learned this year is just learning about the actual cost of running just like various levels of political campaigns, Senate versus city council, just the range and how much those races themselves can cost. So my confidence in my vote being counted relatively high. My confidence in the ability of people that are actually going to advocate for the most of us, right? The through line, that sort of common denominator amongst us, that is a lot less because of all of the barriers that exist to get there. So it's more so, a lack of confidence, I think, in the folks that are able to even get to the place of us voting for them. But the votes counting, I feel relatively confident in.
All right, well, then you sound like you're a part of this group that was surveyed by the GRIO. Take a look at this, folks. Based on this new GRIO KFF survey, they found that 84% of Black voters believe their vote will be accurately counted in this November's midterm election. Even among Black Republicans and Republican-leaning independents, 80% think their votes will be tallied honestly. Now, this is a testament to people's faith in American democracy, but the sentiment stands in opposition to the experience many Black people are having while voting. That's the first part. Now, here's the second part of this, folks. Take a look. That 71% of Black voters said they were worried about voter suppression, and 45% are concerned about voter fraud interfering with a fair and accurate election in their state. Also, Many Black voters say they've been a victim of voter suppression tactics. 20% of Black voters said they had experienced at least one form of the voter suppression tactics asked about in the poll. This includes 12% who said they have had their voter registration questioned or told they were not registered to vote, and 11% who said they requested a mail-in ballot that arrived after the election or not at all. Wow. But I think it's still telling, Bakari, that you still have a very high number of people who say, look, my vote is going to be counted. I mean, we're not talking about 50, 60%. We're talking about 80, 84%. People are still saying, hey, I believe my vote is going to be counted, even Black Republicans. So for me, when I read this, it showed that we still have as much talk as we talk about breaking away from the system, as much talk as we talk about all of the voter suppression issues. We still have a very, very high hope that things are going to go as planned when it comes to counting votes in this year's election. We still have a very high hope. And even though we know, I will say, and this, I hope I'm not like jumping the gun here, but this election might be more pivotal than the presidential election. And we still have a high hope that it's going to work out, which I think is very interesting. We Black folks, man, you gotta love Black folks, man, because even in the midst of all of the stuff, we like, no, but it's going to work itself out. And I don't know if that's the gift of us as a people, or that's the curse. You know what I'm saying? That we operate from. What's your take?
You know, I think if, on some level, it feels like I believe that, our votes will be counted in part because of the suppression tactics that we are also witnessing, right? Like, I think on some level, and I don't know what level of like double, triple sort of mind games, or Jedi mind tricks are being played if, the votes aren't counted, and we are also trying to leverage voter suppression tactics. I think the tactics themselves, I think, speak to the possibility of those, and the likelihood really of those votes being counted. So that's kind of, that's where my mind goes, right? And when it comes to the suppression, I feel like we have plenty of examples of that. We see polling places being moved last minute, folks being told that they're not registered when they were, or, they're registered when we understand all of those things being into play. And it's kind of like, if you can cross all those hurdles to get to the finish line, then we think it'll be counted. But we also believe and know to be true that there are going to be a lot of hurdles, on the path to getting there.
So let me ask you this, because we've been talking about this throughout the week, Bakari, that, you might like the real X factor of the voting block is going to be 18 to 29-year-olds, right? Like there are a number of articles and pieces that are out there saying that the next generation, the young, may not be so enticed to go to the polls this year because they're just not connecting to the candidates. Then they feel like the candidates not speaking to the issues that are important to them. So with this hope, right, do you feel like we may need to change our strategy in terms of talking about voting? Because Black folks vote. If we kind of come and say, well, that's the reason why Black folks don't vote. No, actually, we vote. We come out in numbers. Now, are we going to always come out in Barack Obama 2008 numbers every single election? Right. No. But Black folks vote. So I think that if we're using that as the point of driving people, like we don't vote as often, that's not true. We're voting. And this just goes to show you, we're not only voting, we hope. We have a high hope. We probably have more hope than the people that actually work in the system. You know what I'm saying? We hope. And then I want to go to Shalinda. You made this point. You said, well, Black people are the most optimistic people on the planet. We vote. Let's say Black folks in America. How about that? I don't know around the globe, but let's say Black folks in America, because we vote, we hope, we believe in this system of things. So it would be interesting. Do you think we need to change up the rhetoric around getting people out to vote? if this is, since this seems to be the case.
I do. I mean, I think that as we continue to grow and evolve culturally, I think that the guilt, sort of like that guilt-ridden rhetoric that we use around, our ancestors dying, which is true, right? We know that to be true, but that doesn't have to be the only piece of history that's leveraged to galvanize folks to actually get out and vote. So I think there are lots of opportunities that we have when it comes to being strategic around, like, especially in specific neighborhoods, communities, right? Like cities, there's a lot of opportunity to say, look, if we come out and do X, Y can happen, right? And I think that there's a little bit of a disconnect oftentimes between folks that are driving and developing policy and sometimes, those that are able to actually, galvanize voters. And I know it ultimately boils down to a numbers game, but I think in terms of creating language that's more readily accessible, I think that guilt, from at least for me, right? Like that guilt piece is like, it's only going to get me but so far. And if I'm not holding on to that piece of hope, which, I think the Griot's point, it sounds like a lot of us are still holding on to that. Why are we not leveraging more of that language? So I do think I think there's going to be, just in general, I think there will be a natural evolution. I think especially as we continue to diverge and divest away from the church, right? Like I know, a lot of us raised in those like Abrahamic faiths. I think the further that we get away from that, I think that guilty sort of language will start to subside as well.
Absolutely. We got a tweet about Black men coming out to vote. Keenan, if we can throw that up on the screen, please, brother. Here's take a look, folks. This is this says that black male voters in Georgia turned out in record-breaking numbers for the first day of early voting. And who is this from? Let me see. Who is this from? Just let me know. And I haven't seen one news media article mentioning this story. I think we all know why. So if Black men are coming out in record numbers in Georgia, and big shout out to the brothers that are coming out, but Bakari, I've been coming across pieces that Black men are also thinking about voting for Trump, and I'm not joking.
No, we know.
You know what I'm saying? That brothers could come out, but then are they coming out looking? Are they voting blue? Are they voting red? Who they voting for?
I don't know.
I don't know if, and here's why I'm bringing up the question about the messaging. And I think to your point, you make an excellent point. I mean, the messaging is, okay, yeah, come out to vote, right? Okay. But if we come out to vote and say we vote opposite what we expect, then we got another problem.
We have another problem, but we also have more data. And let me tell you, if it's one thing Black folks, especially Black women folks, are going to do, is leverage some data to make even more strategic decisions. Yeah. And you know what I mean? And move forward. And, I feel like we don't move forward without women. We don't move. So even if Black men come out and are voting, ultimately red instead of blue, so to speak, yeah, I think that data is going to tell Black women exactly where they need to go and when they need to get there. So
absolutely. This is and that tweet was from Christopher, who is Stacey Abrams' political director in Atlanta. And Bakari, you actually said that there's another element of this as we talking about getting Black people to vote. There's something else happening in Atlanta I didn't even know about till you brought it up. What share with the crew what you read about?
Yeah, I just perusing the streets of Twitter.
The town hall streets of Twitter. Okay.
Folks are, there's a post in the HuffPost that the title of it, "This rapper is more politically dangerous than Kanye West. Killer Mike cozied up with Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and Senate candidate Herschel Walker, allowing legitimacy to their campaigns with the Black community." I was shocked. And I won't say shocked because that's not true. I have, in terms of following Killer Mike a little bit when he started campaigning more about Black banking, and then learning that he's also in that capitalism space, and subscribing to this myth that we can save ourselves or leverage capitalism to save our plight, and the sort of like that was professor over from Morgan. I'm blanking out on the title, but the myth of like Black wealth, right, and being able to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Anyway, so once I sort of learned that about Killer Mike, I started to honestly just try to develop a stronger critique of him. And I don't have one that I would feel publicly sharing, but when I saw this post, I saw that, you know, he is that's who he's aligning himself with. And it's pretty scary. He said that Kemp is like running an effective campaign, and it's something that I don't know that we're in a position to. I don't think that we're in a position to be able to really to outsource any of our political analysis, but also understanding that many of us are fatigued and often look up to people, right? We should not look up to celebrities. We know that to be true, but oftentimes we do sort of outsource some of that analysis and thinking that this person will be, you know, in alignment with what's for my best interest. And this is an example of somebody, aligning himself with what does not appear to be the case. I know. It's a lot on a Friday, Farajii.
It is a lot on a Friday. That's why I loved it. That's why I love having you on. All right, so here's what I'm thinking. Here's my initial thought. There is something that is happening, and I can't put my finger on it. And I'm glad that you don't have, you know, you're still processing everything as well, right? So, you know, when you're ready to share, once you feel like you have a definitive analysis, certainly bring it. But here's what I'm hearing so far, and this is the trend. And folks, y'all tell me if I'm going crazy on this. I'm seeing Black people are now fighting for their ability to think critically and not just trying to align themselves politically to what has been the tradition. I'm hearing more Black folks. And even when I talked to our other crew member, B Fly, we had this Kanye West conversation earlier this week. And I'm just reading stuff. Black folks really, the question of Black people aligning themselves with Republicans or joining the Republican space, folks, y'all been watching me all week. Isn't this this is a thing. This is legitimately becoming a thing where you have individuals who are like, I'm not a drone, I'm not a bot, I'm going to think critically. And I don't know, Bakari, I don't know how to have a conversation around it just yet.
Yeah. But
there's a trend. I see a trend, and to my online culture crew, y'all tell me, do y'all see a trend? Do y'all see a trend of Black folks that are saying, no, you know what? We've been going the Democrat route for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. Let's see what we can possibly get from the Republican, which I'm not necessarily mad at, right. But I'm wondering, is the timing for that level of revolution, quote unquote, that level of movement, that level of shifting to the other side, is this the best time to do it? And I don't want to sound like one of them, you know, I'm starting to sound like one of the people like wait to turn it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't know if I would rather take that risk during the presidential campaign, during the presidential election, because that's a little bit further outside of us when you're talking about state and local politics, mm-hmm. rather than doing it on this level. You know what I mean? I'm still mm-hmm. working, I'm still processing. So I'm processing this all right now as Bakari and Shannon. But folks, I want y'all to just like post your thoughts about this. If Killer Mike is saying, giving glowing praise to Stacey Abrams, here's a Black man, he's influential, he's down in Georgia, he has a platform, obviously. and he's giving kudos to a person. And y'all see the ads that we're running right now. Call him Brian Kickback Kemp.
Well, the piece that I and I'm definitely still, processing in real time as well. But I think that, I think it's easy, relatively speaking, right, to say, well, what almost like in this sort of what have the Democrats done for me lately? So why not align myself with Republicans? But I think it really boils down to both of these parties being anti-Black, and collectively, many of us saying this is less anti-Black, right? So just literally being in a position where we have to choose the lesser of two evils, but that means being fully aware, completely conscious of the fact that both of those entities are evil and not 100% in alignment with what we need culturally to achieve, a level of safety and the space to transition from surviving to thriving in this country.
Yeah.
I think that, we look at the Kanye West that start to align themselves with the Republican Party. I think it's almost as if they've gotten to the certain level where, people start to say, like, I don't even see color, right? And it's like, well, what does that mean? How can you not see nuance? How can you not see the brilliancy of these colors and recognize what that means about colonization and rape culture and patriarchy in this country? What do you mean you don't see it? You don't see all of that?
Yeah.
So I think that, and I do, unfortunately, we live in a capitalist country. So I do think that it's possible for certain people to amass a level of power, like financial power, social, political capital, to be able to leverage that power in ways that lead them to believe that race is no longer.
We could go down the record. GOP does not have a good track record when it comes to Black folks' issues. And even on the conversation about finances, right? Even on the conversation about money, I mean, show me the record. What record do we have?
When you get to a point where your financial, like your capital supersedes, right, like that sort of impact that your race is going to have on your socioeconomic status, then you're able to that I think motivates a lot of people. And I'm assuming, I don't have the analysis complete yet of our brother Killer Mike, but that to me is when you get to that point where you then align yourself with what's going to be solely in your financial interest, even if that means voting against your people. I feel like that's what we're seeing. What happened with him, with Kanye and Killer Mike in this instance?
Yeah. And that goes back to something a point I made earlier this week, Bakari, when I was like, there's this hope that our financial situation is going to lead us to the promised land. And the struggle of Black people isn't, of course, the financial disenfranchisement, for lack of a better word, is certainly an outgrowth, but that's not a cause of our struggle.
True.
You see what I'm saying? Like, yes, financial, but we can say the same thing. We can say the same thing about the topic of education. We can say the same thing about the topic of healthcare. Like, which party is more in alignment with our healthcare values, right? Is it the Democrats or the Republicans? You know what I'm saying? Yes. It was President Obama that opened that really, not just him, but I'm saying recent years, they're talking about healthcare for all. We all can benefit from something like that, right? It's when you're talking about school policies, the Republicans are fighting our history being told in schools.
Yes, but again, what's paramount? The Capitol is what's paramount, and I believe that.
I'm trust and believe. I'm not mad at you. I think you're making an excellent point. You're making an excellent point. But I'm just trying to. I'm looking like this because to the people that are watching and who believe that, it's like, but the dollar is losing its value every day in the world market.
Yikes, Farajii. Why you point that out?
You feel what I'm saying? Like let's keep it real. The American dollar is losing its value in the world market, right? Like people, other countries are really having conversations about whether the dollar or the euro or the yen, like the yen in some places is more valuable than the dollar. Mm-hmm. Let's just keep it real. So when we're talking about, I feel like we're jumping on this financial capital bandwagon at the tail end But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, the finances, if you say the finances, but I'm still talking about, you still got other things on the table. You still got education, you got healthcare, you still have like, and
None of
even
those matter. None of those
Janine said
matter.
it. Janine made a point. Janine even said it. She was like, let me go to Janine. She said it's not a party space, but more of a conservative space. Folks legit forget that most Black people are conservative when you get down to it. We're conservative, but at the same time, our families aren't looking like that. You can't just we have interracial families. We have families that are from different ethnic backgrounds. We have families that include LGBTQ. We got all of this diversity that the GOP the Republicans do not welcome.
That's true, but we could be diverse and still vote against the interest of our community in service to ourselves individually. I feel like that's what we see with a lot of
okay.
Right,
So you mean like we taking this individual like pretty much, look, I can't save everybody. I gotta do for me.
When we look at like what is like white Cuban voters in like Florida, right? Places like Florida, right? So you're voting against your community's interests in favor of your own financial interests. And that's all it boils down to. I mean, I think from my perspective, so it's something that I think is unfathomable for us when you look at it through a communal lens. But once you've gotten to that level, I just can only imagine when you get to that tax bracket, if you have not aligned yourself with communities, like with your actual community in multiple communities, if you got to that scale, what do you do? But you privatize your healthcare, you privatize your education, your children's education, you privatize everything. Once you have access to a stream of water, you don't care about polluting anybody else's. And I think that's what we're witnessing. I know that's what we're witnessing. It's not, I think. We know that's what we're witnessing. That's what happened. That's a function of capitalism. And I think that the way that folks continue to vote in favor of their individual interests over communal interests is,
And I think I think just that point right there, Bakari, that's the place. I think we are so frustrated. Many of us are tired of us talking community and us and we, that at this point, we're like, yo, bump all that. I'm just trying to get something for me and my family. I'm trying to get ahead. I'm tired of being in this space. I'm trying to get a little status. I'm trying to get privilege. I'm trying to get some sort of financial freedom. Like whatever way I need to get it.
And you believe it.
And you believe it. And you're like, you know what? They do it. So why can't I? Whatever way I can get it, I'm going to get it. I got to think about me and my family alone, which I can understand. And I'm hesitant because I don't know how we can quote unquote be conscious and then still have a view like it's only about me and mine instead of it's about we and us.
We all understand that as a human, like as mammals, right, on this planet, right. It's a certain survival instinct that we have in order to survive. Like that makes sense. But in terms of how we've been able, we as a community, the way that we have been able to actually make forward progress has been collectively. And unfortunately, the more individualized we become, the less access that we have to that one, just like shared communal history, right? And so and then belief and faith in what's possible. There's I'm blanking out on the titles again. The one that mentioned before is the myth and propaganda of Black buying power, and that's by Professor Jared Ball, who's over at Morgan.
Right.
And there's another about the history of Black co-ops in this country, and we've been able to co-opt, like to create spaces and almost like a continuum of co-ops that have happened for years and years in this country. But when you lose that cultural memory, that means I think on some level we also lose the faith in that cultural possibility. So this is so interesting on so many levels. And Bakari, maybe you and I should just talk about it offline. Like, how do we have a different, like this conversation needs to happen in another moment, because you're talking about really, and I mean,
as much as I've tried to put it out there, like let's have some serious conversations around, a separate political party, right? A serious conversation, a serious consideration. But then to see that there is a slow building energy of that's shifting people into this Republicans, Black folks are going into this Republican space and saying, hey, maybe this is the way to go, versus the slow building energy toward a wholly independent political space, right? I think it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And it speaks volumes about where we are in seeing our own condition in oppression. That is more of like, if you can't beat them, join them type of mentality.
Yeah.
Like, well, we're not going to ever get out of this from under the oppressive tactics of white supremacy. We're never going to be able to truly, win. So why don't we just become one of them?
But I don't even think that's the track that people, I think like when you look at a Kanye West, that before he even got there was, and I don't know if that's where he is, but
right,
that the belief that slavery was a choice, like that perspective in and of itself, you know what I mean? So, but I feel where you're coming from though, and it is, I think ultimately it's, if you can't beat them, join them, right? And
I think for me, it and again, this is just on the, as we kind of like, think through this on air. But for me, it sounds like we're kind of losing faith in our own power. You know what I mean? So we're like, well, we might as well. I mean, they got a better track record. And I said this earlier this week, and I'm going to go back to saying it. We've been at the bottom for so long that for a lot of us, I think that we have to ask ourselves the question, do I really just want that privilege, that power, the money, that status, just to be able to do what I want to do without any accountability, no connectedness to our community?
And oftentimes to be a token. I mean,
and to be a token. And I'm not saying that we want to be a token. But it's like some of us may want to take the hit. Like, hey, you call me a token, but I got money in the bank. Or if you call me a token, I'm further, I got status. If you call me a token, it is what it is because, my views are conservative. And it's like, I don't know. And I feel like this is just a big open platform, open question mark. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I don't think any one person can come up with the answer to this. I think we need to have, and of course we can't get 40, 50 million people in the same space at the same time.
Right.
But for the spaces that we do have, like this platform and other shows, we need to have some serious dialogue. Like, what is it that we want to achieve? Okay, so if this midterm election shows that the Republicans will take the lead in the House, are we going to start pressing the Republicans the way we press the Democrats? Because I don't see that level of pressure. Because you know why? The Republicans don't listen to you. They'll slam the door in your face. The Democrats will at least say, all right, well, come on in. Let's sit down. You want some tea? You know what I'm saying? The Democrats will be like, what you selling? I mean, Republicans, what you selling? We don't want it. Boom, close the door.
It's an interesting unfolding.
It's an interesting. Oh my gosh. It is so. I know you have me like going crazy this weekend, looking through. Look, we gotta stop it right here, because we gotta take our break. But Bakari, thank you so much for pricking. Now you got me thinking, and for bringing up Killer Mike. Oh,
no, man,
Killer Mike, not Stacey Abrams.
I know.
And if she loses, now I don't think Herschel Walker will win. But if Stacey Abrams loses,
I just don't want Herschel Walker to win.
I don't think he will win. But I'm more concerned if y'all for my Georgia watchers, if Stacey Abrams loses, what does that say? What will that say? She's not going to she's not the perfect candidate. And Brother Omakongo Dibinga said it earlier this week. He said the Democrats aren't the almighty, but they're better than the alternative. But if she loses,
yeah.
All right, Bakari. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for checking in as always.
Thank
Good
you
to
for
have you,
having me, brother. All right. Peace.
We'll talk soon. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. Ooh. We got to take a quick pause. When we come back, we're going to put that on the back burner for right now. I got to think through it. You think through it. Let's think through it together and come back at some point, sometime next week. Maybe we're going to regroup because there's a lot of conversations around Black folks, Republican Party aligning themselves to their values and everything. We got to think through it. But when we come back, when we come forward, let's have a conversation with Mr. Kevin Hazards, who wrote a book about the first Black paramedics and why they had to undergo so much racism and discrimination, even though they're saving people's lives. We'll have that conversation and more. So stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
I'm back. All right, folks, welcome back to the second hour of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon. Make sure y'all continue to show y'all support for us here at Black Star Network. Right, you can go directly to our website at blackstarnetwork.com, blackstarnetwork.com, and let's continue to, do and have the conversations that are important to us. But most importantly, let's continue to support Black-owned media as we have these very, very important topics and discussions about the state of affairs here in the country and abroad. So make sure you support us here at blackstarnetwork.com. All right, folks, I want to jump in, and I'm so happy and grateful for my next guest. He is an author and former paramedic who has written a book called American Sirens. And this is a book of talking about the first Black paramedics and their struggle to save people's lives, even in the midst of time where their lives were often threatened. So we want to welcome to the airways of Black Star Network, The Culture, Mr. Kevin Hazards. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, again, we thank you so much for your patience. Just got into a bigger conversation than expected.
Hey, I'm here in Atlanta, so I know all about that one.
Ooh, wow, Kevin, I can pick your brain all day about what's going on in Georgia right now. But first, let's talk a little bit about your book. You wrote this book called American Sirens, and Keenan and Ariel, just when we get a chance, there we go. I wanted to show that book right there. This is a very, very fascinating read. Let me share with folks what the Washington Post had to say about this book. Take a look here, folks. This is coming from the Washington Post as they look at this book. They said his book succeeds in recalling long overlooked events. It's a medical and human drama that will make readers appreciate the courage of the first paramedics, the foresight of a physician not content to restrict emergency medicine to other doctors, and the artistry of modern EMS workers. It's also a narrative bristling with the indignities of racism and medical ignorance, has its subjects defied and overcome prejudice, but also were often overwhelmed by both. Wow. First and foremost, congratulations, Kevin, because this is a very, very fascinating read. I don't think a lot of people thought about the stories of the first Black paramedic. What inspired you to write this book?
I did the job for 10 years. And somebody at one point said, have you ever heard of these guys? And the truth is I hadn't. This is something that changed my life, being a paramedic, sort of the defining decade of my life, through my 20s. And when it was all over with, I had no idea who started it. That in 1965, there was a group of guys who did this. That, I never heard that. I knew that there was a moment where if you had an emergency, an ambulance, or like a hearse would show up at your house, right? And then the next thing I know, there's this TV show called Emergency with all these guys running around, saving people in Los Angeles. But like the bridge from how we got to a hearse arriving at your house and modern EMS, nobody had ever mentioned that. And then somebody said to me one time, have you ever heard of Freedom House? I hadn't. I looked it up. I realized nobody had ever wrote this history down. And so I started looking into it. And of course, the minute you reach out to the people who were involved, they say, well, yeah, this ended in 1975 and we've been waiting for the world to notice. What took you so long?
Wow. So let's talk about the cultural side, because as a white male writing about Black paramedics, right? I know people were probably like, I'm sure your editors or somebody in the publishing world was like, you're doing this, Kevin?
Yeah. Well, surely, one, this story has been waiting to be told since before I was born. So when I started calling guys who were involved, none of them said, hey, dude, they just said, thank you. Let's get started. Secondly, again, as a paramedic, like to me, this was an incredibly important story. EMS and ambulances, paramedicine, it shaped who I am. And to me that, its origins needed to be told. And finally, I think if we've learned anything from stuff like the 1619 Project, what we learned is this has been going on for the entirety of American history. And if you're interested in American history, then you're interested in all facets of it. Whether you are a white guy, whether you're a Black guy, these things are a part of who we are from day one all the way up until now. And so, to me, that this was a critical story that needed to be told, and I just kind of jumped all over it.
What has been some of the surprising parts of you telling this story? What has taken you, has shocked you a little bit as you read about these stories?
First and foremost, that they started everything. I don't think anybody is aware of the ways in which this group of guys who started working in 67 and ended in 75, the degree to which everything that we do today started with them. So the color of the ambulances, the shape of the interior dimensions of the ambulances, right. The fact that we use Narcan to reduce overdoses. They're the first people to have done that. They were in 1975, they're named the national standard by a commission set up by President Gerald Ford, and they field test and then release the world's first standardized paramedic training manual that people used all the way up until the time that I started training in the 2000s. So I was shocked to learn how much these guys had affected the field as it exists today. To me, that was stunning. And then the other thing, which of course in no way was stunning, but over and over again, I was startled by, was how little things had changed. I started writing this book in 2020. So part of EMS, begins, this is a story that's been going on to a certain degree for quite some time. In 1832, there's this cholera epidemic in London, and people's response to hospitals saying, hey, let's grab everybody who has cholera and bring them into the hospital so that they don't infect family members, people's reaction is, well, it's a government conspiracy. There's no such thing as cholera. They're not really, trying to remove you. This is a government trying to control you. In 2020, that was a conversation that certainly spoke to me. And the other side of it, of course, is the racial side. The things that these guys are going through, the things that motivated them to accept this job in 67, the problems and hurdles that they faced from 67 on, are the same things that people are facing today. How little the world has changed, to me, was perhaps the most startling thing.
The most startling thing. Folks, I want you to post your comments as we talk to Mr. Kevin Hazards, as he's the author of the book American Sirens, the story of the first Black paramedics who have essentially created a whole new industry on the backs of racism, discrimination, in an attempt to save people's lives. And I think that is so interesting, that their lives were being threatened as they were trying to save people's lives. And I'm wondering, Kevin, as a writer, how do you tell a story that humanizes those individuals, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about retelling history, they're put on this pedestal where it's like, either they're quote unquote good for history or quote unquote not so good for history, right? But as a writer, how do you make sure that the human side of them, they're not just a symbol, but that they're human beings who really just at the root of everything they did, they just wanted to see change. They just wanted to do the right thing. They just wanted to be seen as human beings. How do you tell a story in that vein?
I mean, I try to think of myself. I put myself in their shoes. If you go to 1967, when they were trying to recruit people for this job, this may be the worst sales pitch of all time. Hey, walk away from your life, set up, come here 5 days a week, maybe 7 days a week. You're going to work days. You're going to work nights. We're going to pay you very little bit of money. And oh, by the way, this training program, which is going to last 8 months, is for a job that technically doesn't exist. For me, that's absolutely the worst sales pitch. So question one was like, why on earth did you say yes? Like, why? What made you go into this? What made you do this? And then, so people, they start explaining what was going on in their neighborhood. Like we sort of know a little bit about the Hill District, and largely, if nothing else, from August Wilson. We've seen the cycle. Denzel brought it to even more people. So we have some understanding of what the Hill District is. That's where these guys are from. So you start to understand, okay, these are young men who are really up against it and who get this awful sales pitch. Well, for them, it's not an awful sales pitch. For them, it is, hey, here's this weird job that's coming out. And I'm not sure I care about medicine. I'm not sure I know what an ambulance is, but I know that if this thing works, if I can make this work, this will be the thing that finally forces the world to reckon with me as a person. That this will be the thing that they can't ignore. This will be the first time that my voice will have to be heard. And that's a very humanizing thing. It almost doesn't matter who you are. You can understand somebody really feeling like the world has turned their back on them and grasping for the one thing that they think might pull them out of it and holding on for dear life. It's moments like that, or, someone's first call. One of the main characters from this book is a guy named John Moon, who's got an absolutely incredible story.
Yep.
And I asked him, I said, when you first started, because John has been living with this as many of these people have. They have been trying since 75 to get the world to pay attention to their story. So they've kind of told versions of this repeatedly, and so there's a certain degree of like almost glossing over, like, yeah, we did this, because they're kind of used to people asking certain questions. And so I said, all right, let's get back to your first call when you're 22, whatever, and like, were you scared? And and then instantly John starts laughing, right? And then it's like, of course I was scared. I was terrified. I thought I was going to kill this woman. Those human moments are the things that really bring it back.
And I'm glad that you brought up John, because I think his story was fascinating. Do you feel like John kind of went into this process, and all of the other men went into this process thinking that, you put this piece in there from Gil Scott-Heron, one of his most famous lines, the revolution will not be televised. Do you think that John saw this as a revolution, that the other men saw this as the beginning of a revolution? Or how do they see themselves as in the course of history?
I don't think at the time they realized it was a revolution. They were taking incredible pride in a job that was allowing them to serve their community, and more so, it was a job that was allowing them to show the communities that didn't want them just what they were made of. I think that's what they were focused on more than anything else. However, as time goes on, you know, in 72, the TV show Emergency comes on. And this is the reason that I chose, you know, that Gil Scott-Heron quote was so wonderful. But the reason I chose it, in 1972, this television show called Emergency comes on, and it becomes, for generations of paramedics, the thing that inspired them. And what is this show? It's set in Los Angeles. It's a pair of white guys, very photogenic looking white guys who wander around the city of Los Angeles saving lives. And they're sitting back in Pittsburgh, fighting for their lives every day with a city that's trying to shut them down. And they're watching this thing that they started be glorified on television and realizing that they're not part of the story that's being told, that the revolution that they kicked off. And now they're realizing, oh, wait a minute. Like, people around the country are coming to us. People around the world are coming to us. Everybody's adopting this thing that we've made. And we're not going to be part of the story. And so, you know, they weren't aware initially of what they were doing, but it became apparent very quickly just how important they were and how quickly the world was going to turn their back on them.
Man, I'm just blown away, you know, and I've had conversations with my wife and others, and you know, when you talk about Black history, when we're talking about American history, there's so much that we don't know, right? That like we don't take the time to know. So to read stories like this is just so refreshing, because it gives us a glimpse into something that was unknown, and yet it's so valuable, so needed. Like who would have known that these Black men were the first paramedics? Who would have known that? And this is not like the 1800s. You're talking about mid 20th century.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all this happened seconds before I was born. You know what I mean? Like, this is not ancient history. This ended in 75. And again, I did this job. I've talked to people who I worked with. Hey, did you know this? No. I've talked to people who live in Pittsburgh. Hey, did you know this? You know, Pittsburgh's got this great medical history. Jonas Salk was there, and he, you know, invented the polio vaccine. And you have, you know, organ transplants and heart valve replacements. And the father of CPR moves there, Peter Saffer, to invent paramedics. Hey, did you guys know that happened? Nope. It's been entirely swept under the rug. And I think, you know, I mean, it's no secret why. I mean, we've all watched Tom Hanks go to the moon 50 times, and yet Hidden Figures comes on and we're like, well, wait a minute. How do we watch Tom Hanks go to the moon 50 times? But none of us knew that the woman who made it possible was sitting over there and running across the lot to use the bathroom. You know, like, why haven't we heard that story?
Right. And so what's been the feedback that you received from the medical community, from paramedics? Do you feel like the industry will now, you know, take this history more seriously, in that, you know, there's going to be some sort of honoring of these men?
Yeah. You know, when I was writing it, I was pretty terrified that people were going to say that they were going to push back. People within the industry were going to push back and say, well, I don't, you know, and quibble with, you know, the facts of this case. So I sort of I mean, there's 200 pages of notes in the back of this thing to like explain where I got all my information from, because I wanted it to be airtight. And then it came out, and everybody has just come forward and said, man, I'm glad you did this. Like, I'm going to teach this to my EMT students. Why didn't we know this? And there are people that live in places that I would have thought would not be receptive to this kind of story, who have reached out to say, this is wonderful, and I'm teaching it to my paramedic students. Or, you know, I just told my partner about this last night. And, you know, when you're not to beat up on North Carolina or anything, but when you talk to a dude in a small town in North Carolina, like, you have a certain opinion of what this guy might be like. And then he turns to you and he's like, no, man, I thought this was great. And I told all my friends about it. It's been surprising. I think in a lot of ways, people are happy to know their own history, even if they're not personally reflected in it. You know, I think they're happy to know it.
We got some folks that are joining us, and this is my online culture crew that are sharing their thoughts on this. Folks, make sure you post your comments, your questions, as we are talking to Mr. Kevin Hazards, author of the new book, American Sirens. Patricia, you checked in. You said, see that they have family. Why the story has not been told? That's a good point. Why haven't we heard from the families of these men?
I mean, I think there's a couple of reasons. One, there was a woman I spoke to at one point, and she said, you know, it was the mid 80s before I even realized what my husband did. You know, I think to a degree it is like, you know, our grandfathers who were in World War II, or our dads who were in Vietnam. They came home and they just sort of moved on. a lot of these guys, when Freedom House ended, they either joined the city EMS department or they moved on to another part of life. And this just became a part of their past. I don't know that everybody always used to discuss all of their history. So there's a certain degree of, like compartmentalization, I think, that happened. Another, I think is, I write for television. And when I first started, somebody said to me, make sure your main character is a white guy so that people will watch it. People will actually care about him. That was an honest statement that someone made to me. I don't think that the world really wanted to hear these stories or was interested in hearing these stories. It has been picked up throughout the decades, various times in local papers and magazines. It just never made a mainstream dent. And I think it's because the world just sort of shrugged and was like, yeah, okay, all right. A bunch of guys from this neighborhood that, we don't really care about, or that we have a certain opinion of, and they did this thing, but whatever. And we're just going to move, I think it was a thing that just got swept under. And I think people tried.
Yeah.
Certainly John Moon has spent his life trying to do things. There were others, a guy named Walt Brown, who unfortunately has passed away. He spent every day of his life not only trying to get the world to hear the story, but quite bitter that nobody would. So efforts were made. I just think they were not receptive ears, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can definitely believe that. I can definitely believe, especially, come on, let's be honest. Like, we're living in a time and living in a country where Black history and American history, there seems to be less coexistence between those two worlds, right? And two sets of facts that we don't want to know, and to Jayla Woods, Jayla's one of our loyal watchers, Kevin, she said, there are a whole lot of Black inventors, a lot of things that we are using now in society is because of their inventions. But as usual, they don't want this to be known. We have to, and I'm saying as Black folks and as people in this country, both Black, white, Asian, Latino, like, we have to unearth a lot of this history on our own because it's just not taught. Now, should we, and I'm wondering from your vantage point as a writer and as one who studies culture and history, should we expect schools to teach us these things? Or is it our responsibility to look for it, especially if it's not on our radar? Should we still have this burden of going out to learn these things on our own?
I think schools should do what they can. My son's in 6th grade. He just finished a World War II section in school, and the things that they didn't cover would blow your mind. Huge aspects of the pivotal moment in the 20th century weren't covered because they didn't have enough time. So I think that everything needs to be, you need to draw out bits and pieces of various things. And, but some of it is going to come down to us. Some of it's going to come down to conversations among people to say, hey, look, this is the thing that we did. And here's our story. But, I think we need to be a lot more aware of where we're selecting our history from and what pieces of history we're selecting. It's very easy to say, well, these four things happened. It's just like when I was growing up, World War II, Greatest Generation, heard it all the time. And then, in the last few years, you start to hear other stories about, guy in South Carolina comes home and he's blinded getting off of a bus because he's wearing his military uniform. Those kind of stories are everywhere. They're out there, but we didn't know that. Or at least I certainly didn't know that. It wasn't part of what was taught to me. I went to a majority white school, and that was not the history that they wanted us to be thinking of when they were thinking of this victorious America that was going to sort of ascend into a cultural force around the globe. That wasn't part of the narrative. And so, they sort of pushed it to the side.
Yeah.
But, if you look at television, like what has TV taught us in the last 15 or 20 years? Like a hero can be complicated. A hero can have negative sides. The notion that, like, don't tell that part of American history because it makes America look bad. Sure it does. But like, we are flawed as a people. That simply makes us people. Let's look at all of it and figure out how we can learn and grow and change from whatever it was that we did, yesterday, last year, last month, last decade.
Absolutely. And Kevin, I feel the same way. Like, we try to sanitize this view of America, and we're doing more harm than good. If we keep the history the way it is, if we tell the history that based on what actually happened, then people will have a greater trust, for one, and we maintain some level of integrity in speaking on his history. And I think it's a dangerous slope when we get into a space where we start to try to massage history to fit our own political, personal agendas or social agendas. And it's like, you got to remember, you have so many people. There are so many people. As much as and I mean, this is how I think, Kevin. So you might agree with me or disagree with me, but we're living in a time that even among adults, we don't have all of the details on a given circumstance or any given thing, and we make a lot of conjectures. We form our opinions based on these conjectures, and as a result of that, our opinions become then fact. Oh, this is the truth.
Yeah. Versus,
you know what? I may be wrong, or I may need more information, and that's the part. Like it's hard for us to come to grip with the reality of things, and that's concerning here in this country. That and I said this in the beginning, at the earlier this week, talking about we're living in this state of denial. Everybody has this, everybody has a lot of people got an address in the state of denial because we just don't want to hear the actual facts of a circumstance. What's your take on it?
Man, I go back to seventh grade, and when they're teaching us about drugs, and they say try weed one time, and the next thing you know, you're gonna be smoking crack, and we all laughed, and it was like whatever they said after that, it didn't matter, because it was like, that's not true. Because first of all, in seventh grade, half of us had already smoked weed, and so we knew what it was and wasn't going to do to us. They lost all credibility, and that's to me, that's like. That's kind of where we are with a lot of these. If you're going to, sort of squeeze reality to fit some kind of truth that really doesn't exist, then you're going to lose your audience. No one's going to trust you. You're not going to have credibility. And then what you're left with is like this weird thing where everybody's kind of trying to like piece together their own thing. There was something somebody said like somewhere 2017, 2018, and I heard it on at some NPR station or something, where it was this Russian guy who said, what you guys are doing, what's happening right now is enough people get confused, enough people get frustrated because there's so many different things coming in and nobody's sure what to believe, that apathy sets in. And there's nothing that a dictator loves more than apathy, because then people tune out. And, these are that's the end result of saying like, well, I don't know, or I'm just going to ignore it. The truth goes out the window.
We're in a huge cultural war regarding truth and history right now.
Yeah.
We're in a huge cultural war, which is why, writers like yourself and others, there's so much more emphasis on pieces, especially historical pieces, because we're seeing the outgrowth. We're seeing the consequences of you constantly lying to anybody, just seeing the consequences of lying. And we can talk about Trump, but Trump didn't invent lies, right? You know what I mean? Like people have been lying, and I think that the ironic part is like, well, the American political system or the social systems that make up this country, like we have been telling the truth the whole lot. Please. None of this stuff has been, and I'm saying as a Black man in this country, we have not been told the truth. We haven't been told the truth about, this part of our history. We haven't been told the truth about the medical, how the medical community has attacked Black men and women through various ways, right? Like these stories need to be told, and they need to be told in an unadulterated, unfiltered, as close to the truth as possible, because we're never going to move forward in this country if we keep lying to people. It's like a child, it's like you're in a relationship, you're constantly lying to cover up the last lie. You thinking your partner is going to just, okay, but you're just constantly chipping away at the foundation of that relationship. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Kevin, I want to get to a couple of more comments, and then we'll certainly let you go. But I truly appreciate your time, man. I really do. Pedro R&B, you said somebody else always tells our stories. We need to tell our stories without puppet masters. So people sat on information, afraid to speak the truth, or were they threatened to speak out? Well, let me just say, and Kevin, I certainly want to get your take on this. If somebody is not telling our story, then we will be upset. If somebody takes on telling our story and they're doing it adhering to certain protocol, certain values, a certain standard, why do we continue to be upset? I don't get it. I don't get it. I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, the story needs to be out there. It's been over 50 years. It's been over 50 years. So we need to tell a story. And unless, Kevin, unless you have this ulterior motive and say, I'm going to tell the story of Black paramedics and I'm just going to completely F up the history. I'm going to disrespect these people that I've talked to. I'm going to betray their trust and telling the stories of their ancestors and of their loved ones because I want to make a buck.
Yeah, I mean, like I certainly understand that you know, I understand frustration, and
yeah,
you know, easy analogy is if you ever watched a movie where somebody was Southern, the Southern accent's always terrible because I guess not a lot of actors could come from the South, so it's always this ridiculous sounding thing, and people from the South always say we're poorly represented. I am certain that, you know, plenty of people can look at, you know, how much of American history has been told specifically by people who look like me and say too often we're misrepresented. That is 100% a valid argument. What I would say in this particular case is, you know, anyone that I talked to, nobody came to me and was like, hey man, this isn't your story to tell. What I heard was my husband died and I wish the world had known what he did. Or, you know, my sister died and you are not a Jewish woman, but you've done the research and, you know, I wish you would tell the world what it was she did. You know, there's a doctor named Nancy Caroline, who's critical in this story, who has died, but, you know, I was able to tell her story. I'm not an Austrian born anesthesiologist. I told Peter Saffer's story, and I'm certainly not a Black man from the Hill. But, you know, all I can do is call someone and say, hey, you know, I've encountered this story. I've been moved by this story. I think it's crazy that I've never heard it and that nobody I know has ever heard this story. So would you be willing to sit down and talk with me and tell me what happened? And, you know, at that point, I will leave it up to the people involved to decide how they feel about me, how they feel about this story, what they want told, how they want it told, where they want it told.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was lucky enough that the people involved said, yeah, all right, I'll talk with you. Let's do this.
And to read the book first.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, just read the book first and then make an assumption. I think that that's the case that, you know, that's the case. And again, I get it because we have been lied to. Our story has often been told by other people, but at the same time, you know, it's been told by other people and the story has been told wrong. So I get it. And we've had those instances happen again and again. But in the case, at this point, read the book. And then once you read the book, find out yourself, you know, then you do your own research and say, okay, what if Kevin is telling the truth on these things? And then follow up with your research. But read the book first. You know, I know that, you know, for example, like this has been an issue with the film Woman King, where people, you know, we all saw the trailer and then we all assumed what the film was about or how it was going to be told, right? And even though there was parts of fiction and that's incorporated in the film, I don't think a lot of people really saw until you see the film. Then you realize, like, wow, this is this is a great film. This is an eye-opening film. This is a film, and so we're at this point now, just in our sojourn and just in our history. Don't make judgments until after you take in the work. And I think that's the important part about this. Make a judgment after you read the book, after you check out what the story is all about. Let me go to one more. Chris V, you checked in and said they need to be teaching this in school, but we already have an uphill battle from those trying to ban CRT books. We must do our parts as parents to educate our children, our kids as well. Which you mentioned you have your son. When what would you recommend? And I'm saying this in terms of how do you tell stories like this, or how do what did the families, do they say, hey Kevin, look, while you're writing this book, encourage people to get their kids involved. How do we get children involved in this storytelling and loving this history?
I think you got to have these conversations, general conversations with the kids around, I think it's very easy to either not want kids around while you're being serious, or to sort of send them to another room if you think something's going to be inappropriate for them. But, I think everybody, if you're having these conversations, if you and whoever you live with, for me, my wife and I sitting around talking, we say this stuff in front of the kids all the time. And it's really, I think that's what awakens some sort of curiosity in their minds. When several years ago, when, Black Lives Matter comes out and we have videotape of police doing terrible things, at the time my son was 9, and like a lot of little kids, firefighters and garbage men and police, like those were all cool sounding things, lights and big trucks. And he sees this and he was kind of shocked, and I could just tell that the earth had moved for him, and he was like, well, but those are the good guys. Well, we don't have that conversation if we push him out of the room, if he wasn't watching the same news that we were watching. But that's a moment where we can say, well, all right, so let's talk about the fact that this is a human institution and there are human beings doing it, and human beings are more often than not quite flawed. And here's terrible stuff that happens. I think he probably views the world differently. I mean, kids who came up in the last several years, they've had a lot, really young kids have gone through everything, from a pandemic to 1,000 other things. We've encouraged we've had our kids involved in all those conversations. And I think you need that, because people have to know from a very early age, what's going on, what's really happening in the world, what are the truths as we perceive them.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what's probably so frustrating about the CRT conversation is like, I don't understand. I really don't get it. Like, history is either history or it isn't. We're either going to teach history or we aren't. I have a hard time with it, with the argument.
Facts. Feeling the same way too, Kevin. Feeling the exact same way. Look, Kevin, our time has certainly been well spent, but I truly, truly appreciate you for coming on to the show, and more importantly, to tell this story about the first Black paramedics. And I think it's absolutely important. Has there been talk about? And a couple of our online culture crew members said, "Is there a movie coming out? Has there been talk about taking this story to the next level?"
Yeah. There's a handful of people who have reached out. So, there's I think there are enough, filmmakers who can tackle this kind of thing. So it's just maybe one of the most wildly cinematic stories that you can imagine. And there's definitely been people that have come around. So hopefully, I know there are plenty of deserving people, in Pittsburgh who are, who would love to signing life rights checks. So hopefully we can make that happen.
There it is right there. Kevin Hazard, I appreciate you, sir, for coming on to the show, talking about your book, The American Sirens. Take a look at this again, folks. American Sirens. This is a book about the first Black paramedics. And these are men who decided to just do something to save the lives of their members of their community And guess what? They created a revolution in the process. It is a fascinating read. It is available now where books are sold. And if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, is it on Audible? Can it be downloaded on Audible yet?
Yep, Audible and a Kindle version. So it's out there in every way you can get it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kevin, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for putting out this piece of work in history. We truly appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Folks, that is going to be the 1-1. All right, so look, I got a couple of things left, and then we'll wrap up the show today, folks. Again, thank you for Kevin Hazard, who is a former paramedic and author of the book American Sirens. All right, here's a little piece. This is something for trends, folks. This is what I see trending right now. Have you heard about Tyler Perry yet? Tyler Perry. This story got me. I just got to bring it up. It's a Friday. Apparently, Tyler Perry got so mad at his accountants that he fired all of them after finding out that the IRS owed him $9 million, folks. Wow. Take a look. He was at an event where he told this story, and he was attending the 2022 Earn Your Leisure conference when he talked about his successful career journey, along with some of the challenges and learning experiences he faced along the way. And he said that money isn't something that I had, and nobody taught me that taxes had to be paid. I didn't go to college, but I paid for Harvard many times over in the mistakes that I made. Apparently, he had a situation where he was being audited by someone from the IRS, and this auditor was so supposedly obsessed with Tyler Perry and how he spent his money. The audit went on for 3 years, according to Tyler Perry. He said he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in accounting with accountants for the audit, and I'm getting so mad and so frustrated that he was trying to figure out, well, what's going to be the end result. He said, we get to the end of the audit, and the IRS, owe me $9 million. Wow. He said that although his team of accountants were elated about the return, he said he made an executive decision to fire the team responsible for his accounting because he wondered how they missed him paying $9 million. How did he overpay $9 million? This is a cautionary tale for entrepreneurs out there. If somebody is responsible for handling your money, make sure that they know how to handle your money. Wow. $9 million. Can you imagine getting a letter from the IRS saying, hello, Mr. Johnson. Hello, Mrs. Johnson. After further review of your audit, we found that you were in total compliance with all of the tax laws. We found that you had paid your taxes every year, and you have actually overpaid us by $9 million. I think I would have fired my accountants too. I would have fired them too. No way am I paying the government that much over. I'm following. I'm following. Yes, Hotep, you said, wow, the incompetence is real. Very real. How do you overpay somebody? Like, I don't even know. First thing, why is the audit like 3 years? Let me tell you something. You know, you only got one job. That's all it is. It comes down to you only got one job. Make sure you have qualified people. That's the other part of this. This is the other lesson. Make sure you have qualified people around you. If you're going into business, and Tyler Perry said it, you know, he's been through it all, you know, ups and downs and everything, you know, make sure you have qualified people around you. And I know that for some of you are entrepreneurs, you know, y'all probably got some horror stories out there, but just know what you're doing. You know, of course, you can't be everywhere. You can't look over everybody's shoulder. So make sure you have qualified people that you could trust and people that know what they're doing around you to take you, your business, and your money to the next level where you don't have to overpay nobody. You give everybody their just due, and that's it. How about that? Oh, man, that's what we got for trends. All right, folks, it's been a fantastic week. I thank each and every one of you for joining me this week. It has been a phenomenal week. Great conversations. I got a number of special guests that's going to be stopping through next week, so you don't want to miss out. Big shout out to my fantastic culture crew. We're looking to do some new things with the show, bringing more folks into the conversation. And, of course, I want to bring you further into the conversation. So trust and believe, folks, over the next few weeks, we're going to be trying some different things because we want to get more and more engagement from you. So stay tuned for that. I'm really, really excited about some of the ideas that we want to put into action here on The Culture. Make sure you do your due diligence and check us out at blackstarnetwork.com. If you haven't downloaded the app on your phone, if you haven't streamed, if you haven't, subscribed to us on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, if you haven't subscribed, you haven't given any money to help us to continue to build this platform, please do so. Take the time out. It only takes a few moments, folks, of your time to give something to support us, what we're doing here at Black Star, continue to be a voice for the voiceless, continue to talk about the conversations that you don't often hear in other media, and most importantly, to continue to take our conversation, whether it's stating our case, whether it's telling our story, whether it's discussing our culture, to take all of that to the next level. So your support means everything to us here at Black Star Network. So please don't think we take it for granted. Make sure you also check me out on all social media platforms. You can find me at The Real Farajii on Instagram. You can also check me out on Twitter. I love to connect with you, love to build with you. And I thank you so, so much for your ongoing support and for everything that we're putting out there. So make sure y'all follow me. I love to follow you back. And let's continue to build the great community of the culture crew. Let's continue to build the great community for Black Star Network and for Black media in general. All right, stay tuned. Up next at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time is my brother, Big Brother Roland Martin with RMU. So stick around for that. And as always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll reconnect on Monday for another exciting edition of The Culture. So I hope and pray that you have a safe and enjoyable weekend. And I look forward to connecting with you then. Have a good one, family. Peace.